I didn't know the name of a corner on a three-dimensional object. Like, it's not corner.
What's wrong with you?
No, you'll probably recognize it when I say it. But I was like, I don't know if I would call this a corner. Is this just a corner? Because like the top of a pyramid isn't just a corner. You know what
What
I
did you
mean.
come up with?
I didn't come up with it. I had to look it up. It's not making things up. No, of course I am. But it's a vertex, vertices, the vertices. Yeah. And I had to, at the end of the, like, come page 3, I was like, okay, I'm done. I got to look this up. I just don't like sitting in the doubt that corner is the wrong word. No. Like, if I wrote corner there, the next, like, 10 words, next 20 words are aware that corner is the sound there. And I want to find words. It probably is. I don't know that I've ever really articulated this out loud, but if that word is going to be something else, there's a very good chance that it's going to like not pop the whole balloon, but like make me. It's going to be like, I, let's say corner. I think it's a kind of corner is a yellow word. Like if corner is there being yellow, and it turns out, and then I kind of the rest of what I do is aware of that being yellow, and it turns out that vertices is totally not yellow. Like that is like almost like a kind of it's like in the blue and sort of like maybe purple, like it's around there, like that, and it's opposite end of this. Well, not opposite, far on the spectrum, and that would ruin everything. That would ruin it for me.
It's a word choice.
Yeah, that would be sort of like I wouldn't. What I would have done after corner, but as I was saying, was like a little bit like conscious of that being like that. That was the piece there. I know when I hear myself say it, that sounds a little bit bananas, but it really is kind of true. But then I will also immediately follow with this. If it could be sometimes if I wrote 20 words aware of the fact that word number 3 was corner, and maybe if the word that I really needed to put there was corners, or it turns out to have been vertices, that is completely E, especially because of the long E. It's a very tricky thing because it can like really do a kind of, it can thin the music out, or it can sort of do something you didn't really want. But then sometimes too, the word that turns out to be the one that was correct and you made a mistake, or someone else suggests you replace some word with something else. Sometimes uh, the the differentness can actually be interesting. A little bit kind of like a distressing, or a kind of or if collaging, because it is on some level collaging. If turns out you thought what you needed there was orange, but it was really kind of like a muddy copper, and they're like, yeah, that muddy copper kind of makes it a little bit more, a little less bright. My tradition is just is like a it's more meditative lyric, that's, but I love to import a kind of encyclopedic or essayistic uh, um, uh, value set sometimes into it, or even sort of language into it, uh, um, in order to sort of like make meaning, but in order to show that the fabrication of meaning happens in the context of things that might also just be very sensuous or ridiculous. And also, I just kind of like the music. I kind of like the music of expository stuff in the midst of other kinds of musics. And I also am a little bit compelled to um, take expository stuff into like encyclopedic, let's just say that, and to uh, break it down into a kind of condition that sometimes like when you read I don't have here, but sometimes like when you read the back of a bottle of a shampoo, and you can see how something funny was happened there in the description because it's been broken into lines that are not, the line breaks aren't meaningful, but they can still like for a moment do something funny or find a surprising music in the sort of compression. I like to do that when I borrow, or not borrow, I don't really do too much collaging, but when I use that kind of a language, even as it's like stating its claim, it's accidentally aspiring to music. nature is the cruelest month, which is like the statement, and then the description. I should have it memorized if I'm going to mention it as often as I do. But then that describes the tubers and the mud and the lilacs and all that kind of stuff coexisting. That becomes a kind of bodily, a kind of physical instantiation of the statement that's made at the beginning. That's like a drastic example. Like you could even say like, we had a lot for dinner. Uh, Little neck clams on the half shell, cornbread, uh, uh, asparagus, bread pudding, or whatever it might be. And then everything in that list is sort of like something that you experience kind of sensuously. Probably imagine it a little bit, or you can sort of like fluff that up with like a language like, for example, the tiniest little necks I've ever seen, no bigger than a quarter. That kind of then gives us more physical, that part of our mind that visualizes things, and then even that comparison to a quarter. Now you've got the quarter on the little next. That's a little bit of a different kind of language than like we had a lot for dinner. And there are some poets who are interested in like we had a lot for dinner. We didn't go anywhere after. We sat in the living room until someone began to cry, and that's like pure like this very denotative kind of stuff. But see, after a certain see, didn't you guys say we sat in the living room until someone started to cry? And like right around there, I'd be like, tell me a little bit more about those tears. You know what I mean? And then sort of like cried tears the size of fish, and then I was like, oh, now we're off to the races. And you started off with this very denotative, straightforward, probably even end stop lines. And then when that person starts to cry, what they're crying is fishes. That sets up an expectation that language is going to be acting a certain kind of way. And then when we get down to that sort of fourth line or fifth, if it is, that sort of makes the tears into fishes. We're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. So that happens with a certain amount of excitement. That to me, like once you sort of, and when you read a poem, at least maybe not like it necessarily in a seminar that's doing more hermeneutical work or analytical work or whatever it might be. But when you're like in a writing seminar or when you're in a workshop, you want to sort of make sure that your conversation is helping to attune people to that kind of shift. Do you know what I mean? Because that's, I think, like art versus other kinds of language use comes from that, from being able to sort of like feel um, the affective, the sonic, the phonic, and it is really, a lot of it is affective. A lot of it is this sort of like emotional or associative sort of key, like the key that a phrase might be in, and whether you want to amplify that, whether you want to like. I guess it could sort of alternate that between two other things, or whether you just want to repel very far from it. We talked about that at the reading on Wednesday. I mentioned Suzanne Langer, and it was nice to see Willard so excited to hear someone mention Suzanne Langer. But she is someone whose book Feeling of Form was had a lot of insights that sort of like stuck with me. And it had to do with her saying that would be the grounds for discussion of a musicality in poetry, rather than sort of the sound, things like euphony or cacophony or sound patterns. Like that's something a little bit different, because she was looking at music not in terms of merely how it sounds, but how it feels to hear it. Yeah, and because she was focusing on feeling and form. That to me is that rings true when you hear that kind of shift from mere statement, exposition, to something that's like treating the eye or treating the ear, while the mind maybe watches, you know. There are going to be those poems that sort of start with the title, that you've got a title, and for whatever reason, you know that you have to write a poem with it. Stevens did that. My great friend and colleague and mentor, Lucy Brock-Roydo, did that often. Sometimes when you have a poem like that, it just sort of somehow, on some level, tells you that there is some kind of meditative truth you will be able to get at beautifully if you consider that title as your either the magnet dragging all the iron up out of your mind, or just sort of the target that you're aiming for. So follow that hunch, that instinct. But sometimes you just want the most meager title. Sometimes you want a title that's going to actually put a sauce on the poem. So it's never the same thing. Um, Sometimes you want a title that's going to sort of bleed into the poem. Sometimes you want a title that's going to make a kind of audacious claim for the poem, like if you call it like capitalism, and it's a poem about, let me see, the poem about the dinner that they were having, and then no one said anything after dinner. They sat in the living room and someone cried fish. I bet then they'd probably try to market that fish. And if that became successful, they would have to keep their daughter perpetually unhappy in order to keep her crying. And that would have to generate more and more fish. But what color did you see the fish? Silver?
Me?
Yeah.
Blue.
Blue, truly blue.
Blue fish.
Like the fish, the blue fish.
Yeah.
With the blue on the back of the dorsal. Yeah. That's a larger fish than I could imagine. Oh, really?
Striper.
Striped blue bat. Blue. I'm thinking. Yeah. Have you had a smoked bluefish pate? It's so good.